Hel- Hello, everybody. My name is Tim. I'm the host of Theology Taco. It's good to be back. I took about maybe a 2-month break just because of some unforeseen circumstances, like the birth of my fourth kid who came a month early. And then we've been sick here in my household, so we haven't exactly I haven't exactly had the energy nor the time to be able to devote to this podcast. But I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad that you're listening. So today I want to talk about something that can be a confusing or thorny subject if you're a parent, and that is the issue of scary stories and your kids being exposed to them. So I want to try to look at some questions like, what does the Bible say about fear, and where do you draw the line with scary stories, and also to try to make a case for kids being exposed to scary stories. And my son Ethan is going to help me with that, and I'll share an interview that I did with him so that he can do that. Moving on, when I think about kids and scary stories, I can't seem to escape the stereotypical pearl clutching that many characterize Christians of doing. I think part of that has to do with my youth. I grew up during what was called the satanic panic in the 80s and early 90s, where Christians really shunned anything to do with magic and even things like rock and roll. I couldn't even celebrate Halloween until 3rd grade, and I don't say that to criticize my parents at all. I think that they were just trying to do what was best for myself and my family, and we have asked from that. So for me, this made things that were scary a forbidden fruit, and I would seek out media that would give me the sensation of fear. But flash forward to nowadays, and it's still somewhat true, but my oldest son, though, he loves scary stuff, and he's not bashful about it at all, especially scary video games. And it took me a while to accept that for him it was a genuine interest on his part. And now I monitor the content that he's viewing, and he pretty much has free reign in fulfilling that interest as long as I think that the content is acceptable for his age. So I thought it would be fun to bring him on here for a little interview so that he can make his case of why he's into that stuff and why I should let him be into that. So here is our little interview. Okay, everybody, now we're off to Ethan's portion of the podcast. Ethan is my son, and he's here with me.
Hello.
How old are you?
12.
12, okay. So, one of Ethan's favorite things to do is to play Five Nights at Freddy's, right?
Yes.
And he's pretty obsessed with this game. He watches all about it on YouTube, and he does art. He draws art about it, and he writes stories about it. Did I already say that?
No.
Okay. So first, I'm gonna do a little interview, and then he's gonna share 2 short stories that he's written for Five Nights at Freddy's. Fan fiction. So, Ethan, make a case for you being 12 years old of why you should be able to play a scary game like Five Nights at Freddy's.
So, you play the character and you die, but it's not violent. Like, it's violent, but it's not gory, and there's no swearing or inappropriate things in it.
So players still die, though, right?
Yes, but the animatronics don't kill by violence.
Well, how do they kill you?
They give you a heart attack.
So they scare you to death, right?
Yeah.
Why should I let you be exposed to to death in games like this?
Because it doesn't affect you as badly as when it happens in reality, and it doesn't really affect you at all. For example, when I went to a haunted house in Fright Fest at Six Flags, that sort of scared me, but the game doesn't. So like if it were to scare you, then you would get it stuck in your mind.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay, but so is it fun to get scared? Is it fun to have a sense of fear every once in a while? And why?
Yeah, it's fun to get a sense of fear every once in a while because I just like getting the feeling of adrenaline.
So okay. So games like Five Nights at Freddy's. Why do you like games like this in particular?
Because of all the lore and mysteries to be solved.
Okay. Do you think scary games like this has helped you in any way?
Yes, my spidey senses, critical thinking skills have gotten better.
Nerd alert. Do you think that this game makes you more scared, or what other ways has this game has helped you?
It's helped me because when I watch horror movies with my mom, and there's like something that pops out, like if Michael Myers or somebody came out of nowhere, I wouldn't be scared because when I play the game, it helps me figure out exactly when they're gonna be popping out.
So that kind of game helps you predict, through the music or whatever, through the build up of music when a scare might happen.
Yeah.
Okay. How long have you been playing this game?
Ever since I was 8, which is like 4 years.
Now, you mentioned that you've seen horror movies. Now, you haven't seen horror movies with me, but how long have you been watching horror movies? Or have you been exposed to scary stuff like the games or scary movies?
Probably since I was like 1 or 1.5, because my mom would always like put horror movies on.
Okay. All right. So that was Ethan's little interview. He tried to make his case and support why he thinks he should be playing a scary, and we'll do air quotes, scary game like Five Nights at Freddy's, or even to play or read / watch a creepy or scary movie. And now Ethan is going to share two fan fiction stories that he's written that are based on Five Nights at Freddy's. So if you want to share the first one, make sure you tell us what the title is.
Alright, the first story is called Never Ending Fun. Last week was not a normal one, and I can't remember the whole story, but I can remember that I barely made it out of that horrific place. It all started at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. I was at my house on my computer applying for a job, and all of a sudden my computer blurted, "You've got mail!" I went into my Gmail and found an email from the pizzeria. They were offering me a job as a night guard, and it paid $120 a week, which was barely anything, but it was all I had, so I accepted the offer and headed to the pizzeria. A strange man with purple skin and purple clothes welcomed me into the pizzeria. There were red specks on his hand, and I asked him what happened, and he said, "Don't worry about it." I got led to the stage where I saw those terrible things on it, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica. While I was being given a tour around the crab hole, I was thinking about what was on the purple dude's hands. I was hoping it was paint, but I knew it had to be blood. When we got into the office, he introduced himself. His name was Michael Lafton. The name had sounded familiar, but I just couldn't put my finger on it. At 8 p.m., I closed up the pizzeria and went inside my office. I must have fell asleep because next thing I know, it's 12 a.m., which is the start of my shift. I heard something what sounded like an alarm clock. Apparently it was all a dream. The real story begins at Fazbear's Fright, which was like a haunted house with actual relics from the other pizzeria. It was my second day when an animatronic named Springtrap burned down the attraction. I eventually transferred to another pizzeria called the Sister Location. On my first night, I found a note that said, "Follow me, let's have some fun." I saw a trail of footsteps, so I followed them, and it led me to a room where there were animatronics in it, along with an empty suit. It looked like some sort of Freddy Fazbear. The animatronics powered on, and I screamed. They told me we were gonna have some fun that lasted forever, and they stuffed me into the suit. "Wow, Uncle Mike saw robots," said little Jeremy. "I wish he hadn't," replied William sadly.
Alright, what's this one called?
This one is called The Lore. "Where's Mommy, dang it?" little Jeremy yelled at William. "Stop acting cool, because we all know you're not. Plus you look too much like Humpty Dumpty to be cool," replied William. "Talk about yourself like that," chortled Jeremy. "Alright, let's go to the pizzeria," announced William. We went to the pizzeria and we saw an animatronic. When we took his mask off and we saw Uncle Mike, he opened his eyes and told us to run before we get caught. I asked him who we get caught by, and he answered Scrap Trap. We decided to take his advice and ran away before we got caught by whoever the heck Scrap Trap is. We went down a long and dark hall, and all of a sudden we heard a metallic clank. It had to be Scrap Trap. We saw a nun's head fly through the air. Scrap Trap hit the woman so hard that her head got blown off of her body and flew across the room. It scared the crap out of Jeremy, and it startled me. We got to the door and I tried to pull it open, but there was no use because it was locked. We hid in the scooping room. We heard a loud thudding like a Snorlax was walking down the hall. There were animatronic suits in the scoop room, so we hid in those, and it fooled that pea-brain moron. We climbed out of the suits and headed down another hall that led to the private room. When we reached the private room, we turned around because it wasn't where we needed to be. About 5 minutes later, we finally reached the elevator and went upstairs. We ran back to our house and plopped down on the couch like the slobs we are. Meanwhile, in the Ignition Point Paradox, Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Golden Freddy, and the Fallen are being created. The end.
Alright, so I've got some questions for you. The first one is, why was a nun there?
I don't know, I just put her in the story to be just like a random background character, and then like maybe she was like another person that was stuck in there, and all of a sudden, yeah, her head got blown off her own body.
Okay, and here's my next question. What the heck is a scooping room?
You may be thinking, the scooping room. Are we getting ice cream or something? No, you're not. I mean, it kind of is like a giant ice cream scooper, but it is attached to the wall. And you deactivate the animatronics, put them in front of it, and then like it launches at the animatronics like 2 times, because that's what it does in the game. And it pulls the endoskeleton out of the actual suit part of the animatronic.
Okay, interesting. Alright, that's the end of Ethan's portion of the podcast. I appreciate your help, and I really like that you were able to do this with me so that we could talk about kids and scary stories.
Yeet yeet.
Oh man, middle school. Alright, Ethan, thank you.
You're welcome.
Alright, so there you have it. That's Ethan's defense and pitch for why he thinks that I should let him play that game. Five Nights at Freddy's and games like that. I'm not here to tell you why you should let your kids play that game or games like that, or even watch scary movies. But for me, this is how I draw the line of what I think is acceptable for my children. And I think some of it is a no-brainer. Like, for instance, the maturity of the child. Can your child tell the difference between what's reality and what's fiction? Because there are some kids, and I've even seen this in my own life, that there are kids who have trouble understanding the difference between, a movie or a story, a video game, whatever, and what's reality. They think that both operate the same way, and that's just not true. So if your child has that trouble with that, then maybe you should be a little bit more guarded of what is acceptable for them and what's not. There's more to that. But as long as you don't, stay stagnant, you don't want to maybe bubble your child for their complete life. You want them to grow and mature. And then another place that I draw the line is what's the overall content or message of the story? Is the fear or the scariness, is it justified in the story somehow? And what kind of outcome does the fear lead to? So there's a difference between suspense, a suspenseful story, and a story that's like a slasher flick, like Friday the 13th. Those seem to be all about the gore. The story is really secondary. Whereas if you're watching something more suspenseful, the story is built up around the suspense, or the suspense drives the story, and there is hopefully a hopeful outcome. And you'll see that in a lot of quote unquote scary stories that are directed towards children. But I know that a lot of children's stories that are scary, they tend to lead somewhere. They want you to face your fear. They want you to get past your fear and get to some new area at the end of the story. So what does the Bible say about fear or kids being exposed to scary stories? Well, the Bible doesn't exactly tackle kids and scary stories. So say a lot about fear. For example, the Bible says to fear not well over 300 times. But that's not necessarily the point. The point is that in those times of fear that we trust God. And the Bible doesn't keep scary things away. God doesn't keep us exactly away from scary things, but instead He asks us to trust Him when we do go through scary things, so that we can get to the other side, and so that our trust in Him during those times is strengthened. And this is all biblically supported. You can look at Moses, you can look at the disciples after Christ was crucified, and you can look at things that the Apostle Paul went through and all the other apostles went through. They all went through very scary and fearful situations, and there's a whole bunch more in the Bible. One specific story that's popping up is when I think it was the prophet Elijah and his servant. They were surrounded by the enemy, and the servant was freaking out, and Elijah was like, hey, don't worry about it. God's with us. In fact, God has surrounded us with his angels, who will number more than the enemy. Then Elijah asked God to open up the servant's eyes so that he can see all these angels, and then it happens, and the servant is pretty much awestruck. So the Bible doesn't keep us away from fear, but it does ask us to trust God through these circumstances. And as much as I understand wanting to protect my child, to keep them from scary things, the fact of the matter is that they need to learn how to deal with fear, because outside of our home, and even sometimes for reality for a lot of kids, is that the world can be a fearful place. And so how do we get our kids to deal with fear? How do we get them to not necessarily be fearful, but to trust God? And they need to be exposed to fearful situations. I'm not saying that you need to make your kid afraid. What I'm saying is, don't keep them from experiences where they're gonna feel some fear, like reading a book, playing a video game, or going up on a high ropes course. There is one author that I want to share with you. He's a children's author, and his name is N.D. Wilson, and he's gonna make this little make a case for why kids should read scary stories. And he says, I write violent stories, I write dark stories, I write them for my own children, and I write them for yours. And when the topic comes up with a radio host or a mom or a teacher in a hallway, the explanation is simple. Every kid in every classroom, every kid in a bunk bed, frantically reading by flashlight, every latchkey kid and every helicopter kid, every single mortal child is growing into a life story in a world full of dangers and beauties. Everyone will have struggles, and ultimately everyone will face death and loss. There is absolutely a time and place for the pokey little puppy and barnyard dance, just like there's a time and place for footy pajamas. But as children grow, fear and danger and terror grow with them, courtesy of the world in which we live in, and the very real existence of shadows. So N.D. Wilson pretty much summarizes everything that I just said, but way better. Your kids are going to face this whether you like it or not. And keeping them from stories that are scary isn't going to help them grow, but it might help them grow. It might help them to face these realities a little bit better. And especially, I think that if you read through the Bible with your children, all of the scary instances, then you might help them develop a trust for God in those scary situations. So there you have it. I'm going to end this topic here. Hopefully this topic was helpful. It was a long process that took me 2 months. I wanted to especially do something with my son because I know that this is something that he really likes, and that I want to develop a healthy relationship with him. So next podcast, we're going to be talking about something completely different. We're going to be talking about the relevancy of the church. Is the church still relevant? Is it not relevant? What do we do to keep it relevant? And yep, that's it. So have a nice week, day, whatever this is. Bye.